The rand firmed in early trade, recovering from an all-time low hit against the dollar last week as investors were spooked by possible sanctions amid U.S. allegations rejected by Pretoria that South Africa had shipped arms to Russia. It hit 19 rand 51 to the dollar at one point on Friday, its weakest level ever. For a look back at the currency's performance over the years, we are joined by Izak Odendaal, who's an investment strategist at Old Mutual Multi-Managers. Izak, thank you so much for your time. To begin with, your thoughts on the recent performance when it comes to the currency. Izak? Izak, just checking if you can.
Yeah, I mean, the interest. I think what's notable about the recent performance of the rand is just how it's diverged from other emerging markets. So typically the rand would move more or less in line with its peer group. In 2023, it has diverged from other emerging markets. They have all, or most of them, have strengthened against the US dollar. The rand has been quite weak, and that, as I said, is since the start of the year. So it predates anything to do with these allegations about arms sales to Russia. So I suppose the question is why? And there are a couple of reasons, one of which is just that our growth outlook is a lot weaker now due to load shedding. It is also the case that other emerging markets have been more aggressive in hiking interest rates compared to South Africa. And that does suggest that the Reserve Bank is probably going to still be hiking rates later this month, to catch up with our peer group.
It's quite interesting because as you were talking, we had a table on screen for the viewers, which indicates the 15 worst days for the South African currency since January 1995. And I remember looking at one of your posts where you mentioned that there's been probably around 216 days since 1995 where the currency lost more than 2% against the dollar, and 131 days where it gained more than 2%. But let's hone in on these 15 worst days here with a 10.3% move. And this was during the global financial crisis in 2008. Are there other events that stand out for you as you look back at the years?
Yeah, so typically the rand really blows out when global conditions are stressful. So the global financial crisis was the worst time for the rand in terms of its daily volatility. But then you can go back to the East Asian crisis of the late 1990s. Obviously, when COVID hit in March of 2020, the rand and all other emerging market currencies blew out. So usually there's a global story. It's not just the South African story. There are a couple of instances where South Africa kind of shot ourselves, scored an own goal. Most notably when President Zuma fired then Finance Minister Nene. But even that event happened against the backdrop of general weakness in emerging market currency. So again, it is quite unusual for the rand to be this weak when other emerging market currencies aren't also weak. So the events of the last, basically since the start of the year, it's a bit unusual in the rand's history of the last 20, 30 years.
In your experience in the markets, is it easy or difficult to be able to pinpoint which particular event could be affecting the rand, whether it's local or global factors? What do you pay attention to in those times?
Yeah, it's always very difficult to pinpoint exactly what moves the market. I mean, remember, we're talking about the decisions of millions and millions of individual investors. But generally, I think it's better to pay attention to what's happening globally. South Africans tend to be very inwardly focused, and we tend to think that everything that happens to the currency is as a result of, some move that happens in the Union Buildings or Luthuli House. And actually, it's the global dynamics that really moves the rand and South African financial markets. So you want to pay attention first and foremost to what is happening to the US dollar. If the dollar is stronger, the rand is going to be weaker. If the dollar is weaker, the rand can actually appreciate. And then, of course, also what's happening with other emerging markets. Because I think the other thing we tend to forget is we're very much part of this peer group. Our peers are Brazil, Mexico, India, Indonesia, and so on. Our peer group is not Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And then thirdly, South Africa is a commodity producer. And so when commodity prices are rising, that tends to benefit the rand. When commodity prices are falling, that tends to hurt the rand. Now, what's happened of late is that the gold price has been going up, but South Africa actually produces not that much gold anymore. We're a much bigger producer of coal, and coal prices have actually fallen quite substantially over the last couple of months. Basically, as kind of the world's energy markets are normalizing post the invasion of Ukraine.
Izak, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That is Izak Odendaal from Old Mutual Multi-Managers.